Good evening, and welcome to the Wakefield Virtual Housing Forum. My name is Bill Carroll. I've been asked to facilitate, more than moderate, this webinar this evening. I want to welcome everybody who's here and has joined in on the internet thing. Tonight, we are going to have a presentation conducted by, first of all, we are proud to have, and fortunate to have, Christine Midori, Senior Development Manager at Massachusetts Housing Project. We'll also have with us tonight Dave Hatfield, the Chairman of the Wakefield Zoning Board of Appeals, Matt Lowry, Chairman of the Planning Board, and Ezra Glenn, who's the Executive Director, Public Planning and Lecturer at MIT Urban Studies and Planning, and also Aaron Kokenda, the Wakefield Community and Economic Development Director. What we're going to do this evening is the forum's put together through a partnership by the town of Wakefield and the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, a nonprofit agency that helps expand affordable housing opportunities through technical assistance, financing, and homeownership. Now, the goals of this evening are to provide facts on housing conditions in Wakefield, which we're all very much interested in and is a constant topic, hear from community members on their housing challenge, and offer opportunities to stay engaged on housing issues in Wakefield. So just as a bit of an overview on what's going to happen here this evening, we're going to get a quick poll to get to know the audience. So those of you tuning in or joining this webinar, you can use your Q&A button to provide questions for us, and also to get this quick poll that we're taking. Will be followed by some stories from some Wakefield residents who have been chosen because of their interesting perspective about those issues. We'll also have a portion where housing frequently asked questions are dealt with. And then understanding affordability, how housing gets built in Wakefield, which is probably why you're all joining in. And then we'll have a question and answer session after that, okay? So again, by way of introduction, we have Christine. That's right, a few tips here. My constant mentor next to me here, I forgot this part. To ask a question, at any time during the presentation, type into the Q&A box. You may ask questions anonymously, and only the panelists will see your questions. And I'm not going to say anything. I can't speak for Steve. This webinar is being recorded, and we will be conducting live polls during the webinar. And, in order to get some feedback and understand, and the idea, this housing issue that's on the forefront for a lot of people, but most people in Wakefield. I'm turning it over to Christine now, is that correct?
Yes.
Christine, Senior Development Manager again at Mass Housing Project. Welcome.
Thank you, Bill, and good evening, everybody. Like Bill said, my name is Christine Midori. I'm a Senior Development Manager at Mass Housing Partnership. And before we get started, since we are all here in the virtual space, it would be nice to just find a way to connect through some of these live polls and see who's in the room. So if you have a smartphone, if you're on your computer, please follow the instructions that I will be sharing in a little bit, and it's going to be easy. So first up, warm-up questions, just to practice the tool itself. What is your favorite place to get breakfast in Wakefield? So please go to, let me pull up. So please go to the website on the top of the screen. It is pollev.com, pollev.com / my first initial and last name, C Madore, CMADORE 552, and answer the question. And as you can see, the responses will be popping up in real time. I see Early Harvest, Brothers, Carol's Cafe. I'm sure these are all excellent choices. A good recommendation for me when I go to Wakefield one day. I have been to Wakefield several times, but ooh, Early Harvest is getting some pretty popular shout outs. Another one for Brother Deli. That's great. North Ave Diner. Great. I'm going to give it a few more seconds. And again, these responses can be anonymous. You don't have to enter your name to answer these questions. And you also don't have to answer the questions at all. But it's good practice for us. The next few questions. All right, I see April's. Okay, the next question. I'd love to know what your connection is to Wakefield. Obviously, you're not everyone lives in Wakefield who might be interested in the topic of housing. So we love to hear about where you're from, where you're coming from. And you can also change your answers if you make a mistake. Great. Seeing the majority of our audience live in Wakefield. Some live and work, and some live in Wakefield and own a business in Wakefield. I'm going to give it a few more seconds before we move on to the next question. Great. Thank you, everybody. Next question. We'd love to know if you're in your 20s or 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, or above. Looks like we got a pretty good spread. Great. Lots of folks in their 30s and 50s and 60s. Great. All right, a few more seconds. Next question. How long have you lived in Wakefield? We have 40% of the audience live in Wakefield for 20 or more years, and 20% under 5. That's great, and several in between. Okay. And the next question, do you own or rent your home in Wakefield? So we have some renters in the audience. The majority are homeowners. Great. Okay, and the final question. What are you looking to take away from the forum tonight? I'd love to hear that. Creating more housing. How can I help make Wakefield welcoming to more people? A better understanding about how Chapter 40B affects housing development. That's great. Learn and share ideas about current housing issues and possible solutions. These are all great. Knowledge on housing affordability and trends, understanding of 40B, people's responses and ideas. Another one about 40B. Condo development and its impact, process of creating housing, impact on zoning. These are all excellent. All right, I'm going to let it go for a few more seconds. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Seeing think looking at the poll answers, it looks like most people are neighbors. So we're all here and we all know each other. Hopefully, if you don't know the others, you will get to know each other when we can all meet back in the same room again. All right. So next up, I'd love for you to meet one of your neighbors, Kiana Veltswich, and she has graciously agreed to attend tonight and share her housing story in Wakefield. So Tiana, if you're in the audience, please raise your hand. Great. I'm going to allow you to talk and unmute you. Did I do that right?
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Great, okay, thanks. So I'm a fairly new resident of Wakefield. I was in certainly that top bucket on the poll of how long you've been here. We've been looking for somewhere where we could buy a home and be in a community and set down roots. And having previously been in the Boston area and on a subway line, when we were looking for a home, we were looking up the commuter rail. So we basically picked a couple of the purple train, as our 3.5-year-old calls it, up the northern side of the city, and we were looking in all the towns around here. So we were looking in Melrose, in Wakefield, in Reading, and some of the neighboring towns. And the line that I used with our realtor was that I needed to be walking distance to a train station and to an ice cream shop. And that's what we were able to find here in Wakefield. It was really important to me, having been, in parts of town centers where there was stuff to walk to. I really wasn't willing to give that up just for more space and a backyard. I really needed to be somewhere where I could be near coffee and ice cream and restaurants and shops and be able to, get around without having to get in the car and feel like I was really sort of isolated in too suburban of an area. So Wakefield really spoke to us in that regard, and we were able to find a spot here. We're pretty near to the downtown and near to the train station, and that's really been a great lifestyle choice for us. We were able to get more space out here, and we have, a little backyard, and we've got, a bedroom for our small kiddo, but able to, be still near to things. Throughout the last few years, we've been taking the train into work. My partner works downtown. So, being close to the commuter rail has really been important to us. I personally feel really strongly about sustainability. So, being able to commute without someone's got an echo. Being able to commute without a car is important to us. Is everyone else hearing that echo? Someone is unmuted, sorry. So being able to commute on the train has been really great for us. And we were even commuting with our toddler on the train to downtown before the pandemic. So as a whole family, we would board the train and get downtown, and and that was really a selling point for us being here in this neighborhood. And being in a neighborhood where we've met a lot of our neighbors and love a lot of them, and it was really important to us to be somewhere also where we could see some embrace of diversity as well. So walking around town and seeing pride flags and Black Lives Matter signs and "You Are Welcome Here" signs, really made us feel that this would be a community where we would feel welcome and really be able to find some neighbors to be close with. And then actually, after we moved up here, we've moved. My mom has moved to Wakefield as well. She's actually also on the call. So she moved up here, and she's in one of the big new apartment buildings. And that was really wonderful for us to be able to find her a space that's real close to us. So she's walking distance to us, which lets her be a close part of our kiddo's life and be able to, help pick him up from preschool and come over for dinner and stuff like that. So we were really appreciative of having some of the newer apartment buildings where, she doesn't want to be doing the maintenance and upkeep of a home at this stage in her life. So having apartment buildings where she could find some community and be in a good safe building was really fantastic for us as well. So all of those things were really big draws for us moving up here to Wakefield, and finding a space where, we could afford to be, and where, we could be near to things and really set down some roots. So we've appreciated being here and investing in our home here. Finding local contractors to help us with, some of the home projects and things like that. So we're very happy here.
Thank you, Tiana, for taking the time and to come share your story. I know it's not easy with little ones underfoot.
He's in the other meeting dinner, yeah.
So I really appreciate you taking the time to come out tonight. And with that, since we're here to learn more about housing, and I saw that many of you are interested in some of the questions that you had asked, or the kind of takeaways you're hoping to get from this forum, are going to be answered throughout the next few slides. So as Bill said, I'm from the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, and we are a statewide public and nonprofit affordable housing organization that works to help increase the supply of affordable housing in Massachusetts. So I'm going to bring up a few frequently asked questions that you yourself may have, or you have heard from your neighbors or your friends in Wakefield. And the first one: Wakefield has enough people. Doesn't new housing just bring in more people from places like Boston, Cambridge, and Somerville? For Wakefield, like many communities in the region and the state, we see a growing population of retirees and empty nesters, just like what Tiana described earlier, who will be looking to downsize from the larger homes that they raised their families in. Currently, the majority of Wakefield's housing stock are homes with 3 or more bedrooms, which means many seniors will have to leave the community to seek housing options that meet their needs, or remain overhoused despite being on fixed incomes. A growing population has economic benefits, including a greater tax base, more support for local businesses, a larger employment base for local employers, and it can also increase vibrancy and diversity in Wakefield. But the town's housing stock isn't meeting the needs of its current residents. There's a significant mismatch between the size of Wakefield's housing inventory and household sizes, as you can see on the chart. More than half of Wakefield's households consist of 1 to 2 people, but only 42% of housing units are studio, 1 bedroom, or 2 bedroom units. Smaller households tend to consist of vulnerable populations, such as seniors living alone or single mothers with children. The lack of smaller housing options also means that lower wage earners in Wakefield, or those who cook your food, pour your coffee, or teach in Wakefield schools, are unable to afford to live in town. And if you have any questions at any point, feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we will answer them at the end of the forum. Next question: how is the new housing in Wakefield affordable when residents can't even afford high rents? It is true that many of the new homes being built in Wakefield are market rate. However, under Wakefield's inclusionary zoning bylaw, at least 18% of these new homes offer more affordable rents for middle and lower income families. These inclusionary units are spread throughout a development and available to those making 80% of area median income, or AMI. For example, as you can see on the screen on this table, a family of 3 people making no more than $90,950 a year, or 80% of area median income, can qualify for an affordable unit. The rents for these inclusionary units are capped at certain levels based on the number of bedrooms. Wakefield residents can consider changes to the inclusionary zoning bylaw to lower this income limit threshold and make them affordable to people and families with different income levels. So here is an example where Wakefield can change your own destiny. in terms of affordability. Next question. Is Wakefield Public Schools' capacity under more pressure due to school-aged children living in new housing built in Wakefield? This is a popular question. New housing doesn't always mean more students. Much of the denser multifamily development in Wakefield were permitted after 2010, a total of about 570 units. But the public school student enrollment numbers during the same period remained steady. Since 2010, the change in Wakefield students' enrollment decreased by 5.2%, or about 183 students. A 2017 study by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council looked at housing permit and enrollment trends across 234 public school districts over 16 years, from 2010 to 2016, and found no correlation between housing production rates and enrollment growth. While it is true that school children occupying new housing units may cause a marginal change in enrollment, they're only one small factor among many. In cities and towns with the most rapid housing production, enrollment barely budged, and most districts with the largest student increases saw very little housing unit change. The rate of housing unit growth is not a useful predictor of overall enrollment change, nor is rapid housing development a precondition to sudden enrollment increases. It appears the broad demographic trends, such as and parental preferences and housing availability, now play a much larger role in enrollment growth and decline. Next question. Does multifamily development bring more traffic congestion to Wakefield? Housing is not the only generator of traffic. Factors that have more impact on traffic generation include Wakefield's proximity to the Route 128 interchange, lack of transit options, and drivers looking for parking. Additionally, the distance between homes, jobs, and places that provide essential goods and services can influence how a person goes from point A to point B. Building homes closer to jobs, transit, and mixing uses are steps that Wakefield can take to shift mobility behaviors. A good question to ask ourselves is, should Wakefield be a community where owning, maintaining, and storing a car is a prerequisite to buying a quart of milk at a supermarket? Reducing traffic congestion is not impossible, but it will take time. Wakefield can start by taking steps to support mobility options that reduce dependency on single occupancy vehicle trips and build homes that are closer to transit and town center, initiatives that town has already been implementing for the past several years. And this is the last FAQ. Wakefield should focus on creating more jobs, not housing. Housing is an essential part of economic development. In 2021, 6 of Wakefield's top 15 tax revenue generators are multifamily residential developments. It is vital that the town ensures that there is a diverse housing stock available to existing and future employees of local companies. Without housing that's affordable to their workforce, employers may need to relocate to areas with more housing opportunity to retain and recruit their talent. Importing workers from other communities may mean generating more traffic to Wakefield. The pandemic has shown that many small businesses have survived because of customers in their own community. Having more neighbors in Wakefield means more customers for Wakefield's restaurants, shops, and services. And with that, I would love to highlight another story from a Wakefield resident. Walter, if you're there, please raise your hand so we can unmute you. There he is. Walter?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay,
Thanks for joining us. Go ahead.
sure. I'm hitting join as panelist here, but
We can hear you.
I'm sorry. I'm calling you from a hotel room. My bandwidth seems to be pretty truncated. Apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you loud and clear.
All right, great. Thank you very much. So, I was asked to tell my story about being in Wakefield, which I love. I moved to Wakefield a little over 30 years ago. I guess that still makes me a carpetbagger to some. Moved here when my daughter was about a year or two old. And we chose Wakefield based on school system and a really incredible sense of community that we loved. Just driving through town, you could feel it. And we were ready to consolidate as empty nesters. We didn't want to leave Wakefield. So we looked around. We almost moved into Boston proper. We wanted to be close to things. We wanted to be close to restaurants. We wanted to be able to walk to the hardware store. We wanted to be able to, get on the train, go into Boston if we weren't going to live in Boston. Go up to Alano's and buy some clothing, get an ice cream. And my wife and I talked about it. So we settled on buying a unit at Wakefield Station, which is on North Ave. And we have not a single regret. We love it. We're so happy that we stayed in Wakefield. I feel strong ties to the community through various things. And I want to point out that in our building, many locals, the vast majority of the people that live in the building are from Wakefield, Linfield, Reading, some from Stoneham. Very few people that come from well outside of the area. I would say the major percentage of people do come from the area. And I see a lot of professionals in the building, people who are pre-retirement just before, like myself, about to retire in a couple of years and or retired. It's a very good mix of people. But the overwhelming factor is that they wanted to consolidate. They wanted to get out of their homes. They didn't want to mow lawns. They didn't want to pay somebody to mow a lawn. When you're an empty nester, when your children are gone, they're off to university or beyond, and you're sitting in a big house, you don't want to have the responsibility of redoing your roof or replacing whatever you have to do. So I think a lot of people are doing that. And one of the factors that I think really gets lost, that my wife and I discuss, is it's a generational demographic aspect. And that is that baby boomers represented one of the largest generations ever. I believe the millennials are a little bit larger, but there's a huge group of baby boomers, and they're all my age. They're all looking to move from that home to someplace more local, right? They truly do. I look at some of the folks that are genuinely concerned about building in Wakefield, and I share that concern as well. I like the fact that Wakefield has kept it to a certain area, at least for these large buildings down near the train station. But I think that point is lost in that it's a demographic shift. It's no different from the World War II shift out to the suburbs. It just happens. It's a generational thing. And I think it's important to note that housing for the baby boomers that are looking to consolidate, Wakefield, I think, has done a pretty good job of creating that. When I look at surrounding communities, I really don't see that effort being made. So I almost have to give kudos to Wakefield for realizing that this shift in demographics, this shift in people seeking housing that isn't a big house, because of the generational demographic shift, it almost seems like they planned it. that way. So again, I sympathize with people who bring up, the overdevelopment of Wakefield, that have been here for 50, 60 years, and don't want to see their small town go away. I get that sentiment. Believe me, I get it. But I still experience my small town by walking up to the center every day. I see most of the people in my building up there either eating at a restaurant, getting an ice cream, having a beer. It really also does contribute to the community from a financial aspect as well. And that's pretty much it. Sorry, that was all one breath.
Thank you, Walter. Thank you for taking the time to share your story. Definitely have heard it just even outside Wakefield. There's a lot of folks who are looking to downsize and looking for a smaller home, like I had mentioned earlier. And I would say you kind of stole my words, because that's exactly what I'm going to talk about next. So we have been hearing a lot of questions about what is actually affordable, what's affordable housing, what is affordability? And it's a very complex topic. And I'm going to try and spend the next few minutes to highlight some key factors on what affordable housing really means. So like Walter said, understanding the age breakdown of Wakefield's population allows us to understand where your community's future housing needs will be. Like most communities across the state, Wakefield's population will continue to get older. This creates a huge need for age-friendly housing, especially as older folks continue to downsize and move out of large 3 to 4 bedroom homes. As we've seen in the previous slide, there's a very limited supply of studio and single bedroom homes that are already in high demand by young professionals. As a result, retirees and empty nesters are competing with young professionals for smaller homes. If Wakefield hopes to accommodate both young professionals and its elderly, then it needs to increase the supply of smaller homes, ones in the 2 bedrooms, to prevent displacement. And again, if you have any questions about any of the data that I'm presenting, please put them in the Q&A and we will try our best to answer as many as we can at the end of the forum. Next, when we say that a home is affordable, it really means that a family does not spend more than 30% of its total income in rent, mortgage, and utilities. Anyone who is paying more than 30% in housing costs is considered cost burden. And you might have noticed on the front page of the Daily Item yesterday, below the fold, there was a headline that said, "Houses keep selling and prices keep rising." The story goes on to cite that the median price of a single-family home in Wakefield last month was $698,750, and up from $630,000 around this time last year. The low supply and high demand for homes is driving up their costs, and the rising prices mean 2 things. First, homeownership is only attainable for those making certain incomes. And second, the tight market creates a trickle-down effect, driving up the cost and prices of smaller condos and starter homes. So I thought I could spend a little bit to talk about what an affordability gap is, so that folks can understand Wakefield's housing market condition from a home buyer's perspective. An affordability gap is the difference between the median selling price of homes and the amount of home buyers earning the median household income can afford to pay for them. So the median selling price means in middle, so there's 50% below the median and 50% above the median. Same for household income. And normally, home buyers with fixed wages are limited to a target purchase price of roughly 3 to 4 times their annual income. So the median sales price of a single-family home in Wakefield in 2019 was $580,000. And I'm using the data from 2019 because that is the most recent census data that is available that allows us to make this analysis on affordability gap. So with that median sales price, a family would need to make about $193,000 a year to afford a median priced single family home in Wakefield. In 2019, the median household income in Wakefield was $100,278, just about $100,000. So that means the income, this median income gives families in Wakefield a purchasing power of about $401,000, which means there is an affordability gap of nearly $179,000. So how do we make up that gap? When we talk about affordability, we're really talking about two different types of affordable housing. So we call the lowercase affordable housing as naturally occurring affordable housing, no restrictions on income or rent. So for example, you're seeking an apartment that might be smaller in size and maybe in an attic or 3-family or an attic apartment. And that's just naturally affordable because of its condition, its location, and its size. So it's like, whoa, I can't believe this apartment is such a good deal. And anyone can live in these naturally affordable housing units as long as you make it past the landlord's checks. And then there's the capital A affordable, which is built or preserved with local, state, or federal funds and subsidies. So those capital A affordable units are only available to families that make a certain income. And those units also have maximum rents. So these are the two main affordable housing when we talk about affordable housing. And lastly, when we talk about income limits, I think these numbers are really hard to grasp when you first see them, but the income limits for different household sizes varies depending on the type of unit that's available with a specific income limit is seen on this chart. And the rent caps for these income restricted units are called fair market rents. So anyone who lives in a capital A affordable housing unit, whether it's a studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, or 4-bedroom unit, their rents has to be capped at these numbers below. And those rents include utilities. So that's my part of talking about housing data. And again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'm going to quickly turn it over to Erin.
Hi, everyone. My name's Erin Kokinda. I'm going to read a letter from Rose Priest. She's a Wakefield resident and also a realtor here in town. She can't join us tonight, so I'm just going to read on her behalf and give you another story about real estate here. So, I am a property owner and resident of the town of Wakefield. I want to applaud the town for conducting a housing forum to recognize and discuss the shortage of affordable housing and various programs that can provide housing opportunities for those who need it. As a real estate broker in Wakefield and surrounding communities, I see firsthand how competitive and difficult it is for many to find affordable housing, including both rental and home ownership. In approximately 2004, the town was on the cutting edge of this issue by being one of the first communities in Massachusetts to implement an inclusionary zoning provision in its zoning bylaw. This provision requires that multifamily developments in the town provide 18% of the units to become permanently available to affordable, low, and moderate income households. Furthermore, this provision of the zoning bylaw encourages a greater diversity of housing accommodations to meet the needs of families, including Wakefield residents, by developing and maintaining a satisfactory proportion of the town's housing stock as affordable dwelling units. I was directly involved professionally in the lottery process for the sale of affordable dwelling units that were created at the Wakefield Landing project on Bennett Street in Wakefield. The lottery process is so exciting for the participants and their families. To see families' long-standing dream of finding a home come true in real time when they are selected is so heartwarming and fulfilling. I would urge our elected and appointed town officials to attend one of those lotteries in person when the opportunity presents itself to witness the wonderful process firsthand. My professional career involves housing, and I have a strong opinion that everyone deserves a fair opportunity to have a place to call home, and we as a community should do whatever we can to help and promote that cause. My hope is the town, as it did in 2004 when implemented the inclusionary zoning, will continue to find ways to expand options to provide housing opportunities for all who so desperately need it. Development is not always a bad thing, as many anti-development and anti-affordable housing people often portray it, especially when it revitalizes blighted and contaminated areas and provides housing opportunities. Blighted and contaminated areas in town, such as Foundry Street, are being reborn with environmental remediation and cleanups that never would have happened if they were not redeveloped, while at the same time providing tremendous affordable housing opportunities for so many people that deserve it. Thank you for letting me share my thoughts and experiences on this issue. Sincerely, Rose Priest.
Thank you, Rose, and thank you, Aaron, for reading that letter on Rose's behalf. The next part of the forum, I'm going to turn it over to our panel of experts to talk about how housing gets built in Wakefield. And first, we're going to have David Hatfield from the Planning Board, and then Matt Lowry. No. Oh, David Hatfield from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Thank you, Ezra, and Matt Lowry from the Planning Board. Thank you. I'm not sure if Matt's here with us, but I'm going to call on David. Oh, they're both here. All right. So, David, you have the floor.
Thank you, Christine. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Welcome, everyone. So this is actually Christine's slide, but we got a kick out of it when we saw it. Yes. Delivering housing in Wakefield, especially multifamily housing. Yeah, it's as simple as putting toothpaste back in on a toothbrush. Yes. Or even back in the tube sometimes. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to cover some of the aspects that, again, some people may not fully understand when it comes to permitting these housing developments in Wakefield in particular. Across the top, there's generally some initial decisions that an applicant may have to consider. For example, does the project meet all zoning requirements? Typically, they don't. There might be some aspects that don't. And then is a zoning bylaw amendment required? By and large, that isn't the case, but occasionally it does come up. And most recently, I think in the last year or so, there was one applicant, I think, was proposing something or contemplating something on North Ave, and they went to town meeting or sponsored an amendment to our zoning bylaws to perhaps facilitate that, and it did not pass. So out the right-hand side that went, and that project did not proceed. But by and large, from that middle box, projects don't require zoning bylaw amendments, but they will instead go right to applying with the building department for special permits and site plan review. And typically, multifamily and mixed use developments will come to the Zoning Board of Appeals. But depending on the nature and location of the project, they may also have to go to the Planning Board for some sort of finding or relief, or to Conservation Commission for, again, some sort of findings if it's near those zones. So the Board of Appeals typically will go through a process of reviewing many aspects of the project. These reviews typically take anywhere from 9 to 12 months, because we typically have a lot of projects on our agenda, so we spend as much time as we can in one hearing and go on to other topics, and it takes just a long time to go through everything. But when you think about the requirements, what's required to create a mixed-use, multifamily kind of development, there are several pages in our bylaws that specifically call out requirements for them, including density and lot size, dimensional requirements like setbacks and height, parking, and affordability, and some other things. So there's a lot of requirements that type of project has to meet unto itself. As well as part of applying for a special permit and site plan review, The special permit has criteria on its own. Is it allowed? Is it essential and desirable? Will it create undue traffic issues? Will it overload our utilities? Will it impact the integrity or character of the district or the town? Or won't cause an excess use of that particular type of development? And so we'll go through several meetings. We'll go through all the site plans, and we'll look at the things in that yellow box there. We'll look at the architectural design. We'll look at site and civil aspects, stormwater, traffic and parking, landscape, lighting, signage, and ultimately when it's built, there should be an operation and maintenance plan that dictates how the building and property is maintained over time, not just built initially. And as part of this, all other departments in the town get a chance to review these plans and weigh in. And typically, we'll hear from engineering department on site and civil aspects, stormwater aspects. We'll hear from traffic advisory committee, our own peer review that looks at the analysis done by the applicants and their consultants, and also the fire department, sprinklers, alarms, and even in a couple of cases, an applicant had to pay to have a hydrant put in close enough to the building because the one wasn't there. So different things can come into play here. And those reviews, as I said, typically take many months, a lot of long nights, and we get public input along the way. We get input from our different town boards and the applicant. And at the end, if we've determined through the course of those reviews and whatever negotiations that might happen, if we determine they've met the criteria for a special permit, then it is granted. And then they subsequently can request a building permit after an appeal period, and then they can begin their project. And yeah, this slide just shows a recent example, one that where Walter lives. He mentioned Wakefield Station at 175 North. Just wanted to show an example of one for folks to visualize. So that's my story. We're from the Board of Appeals, Christine.
Thank you, David.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'll turn over to Matt from the Planning Board if he likes to say a few words. You there, Matt? I see you're unmuted, Matt.
All right. Can
Here
you hear
you
me
are.
now? Okay.
Yep.
All right. A lot of times people ask, what role does the planning board have in housing development in Wakefield? For the most part, we deal with issues with land subdivisions, divisions of smaller portions of lots. And so if someone is going to take a lot that's in a lot of times a general residence zone and they have a larger house on it, a lot of times they will try to split that into two and then potentially put 2 units on each one. So with that, if the applicant meets certain requirements, the board is obligated to basically endorse that plan and sign off on it. So it's what's called the by right plan. I hear people say that, we shouldn't be doing that, but that is a right that everyone has in town that has land. And if you can meet the requirements, you're obligated to do that. So when we do an A&R plan, we cannot put any restrictions on that. It's your right to do that. So we don't have a lot of say in how that process goes. Same with the subdivision. If someone's proposing to put a road in with a certain number of lots, technically, if they meet all the requirements, we are obligated in the end to sign off on that plan. Many times with subdivisions, they will ask for waivers and we'll review that. And if we deem that it's in the best interest, we may grant some of those waivers. But again, all of this is by right. People can do it as long as they meet the regulations. The other thing that the planning board deals with is zoning changes. So if a certain number of people petition, and they bring that to the town council, and the town council recommends that goes forward, we would hold a public hearing at the planning board where we would get testimony from others in town. We would listen to what their recommendations were, or what their proposals were for a zoning change. And then at the end of the hearing process, we would either make a recommendation to approve it or make a recommendation for or against it at town meeting. We don't actually vote up or down that zoning change. We only give a recommendation, and when it goes to town meeting, that's when it's voted on. So when I hear people say you have to not do a zoning change, or you need to change what the zoning, what they're proposing, again, we don't have that power. We can listen to them, we can counsel them on what we think would help. And in the end, we can either recommend it favorably or we would not recommend it. Once it goes to town meeting, it's the citizens of Wakefield that either approve that or not. So I know Dave mentioned one parcel up on North Ave where the applicant came in to rezone it from a certain zone to a general residence zone, which would have allowed him to have multifamily housing on there. This was a pretty long process of going through, listening to the applicant, and in the end, the board believed that this would have been in the best interest of town. But before we made a recommendation, we made sure that all of his ideas and his plans were set into a legally binding deed condition for that parcel. So when we went before town meeting and favorably recommended this, we knew in the end what was going to be built there. Unfortunately, it failed at town meeting, and now that applicant is pursuing other avenues at that site, which unfortunately is going to lead to, well, fortunately, unfortunately, it's going to lead to more housing, but it will be affordable. The bad or the not best part of this, it could be a 40B project, so the controls on that are a little bit less than what we would have liked. So that's basically in a nutshell what the planning board's role is with housing in Wakefield.
Thank you, Matt, for giving us that very detailed overview. I hope folks can recognize how complicated it is to have any housing built in Wakefield. And this is not just unique to Wakefield, but most communities, if not all, they have developers have to jump through several hoops before shovels in the ground. And so I know that there's a lot of interest about the 40B process, and I'm really grateful for Ezra Glenn to join us tonight and talk a little bit about the process itself. Ezra?
Thanks, Christine. Can you all hear me? Okay? Okay, great. I know Matt mentioned 40B, which is a nice segue to this, the next few slides. So I'm going to be, I think there are two more presenters. There's me and then there's Erin. So I think, don't think of us as the bottom of the order. Think of us as we're batting cleanup here, right? So we're just, the bases are loaded. We're going to get the last piece and bring everybody home, and then we'll have some good Q&A. I do know it's been about an hour. People are probably getting restless. So feel free, at home to just stretch, move your arms, get your blood flowing while we go over this last bunch of stuff. My name's Ezra Glenn. I'm, as Christine said, I'm a consultant. I work with Mass Housing Partnership on a number of 40B projects. I'm sort of one of the local experts that they send out to assist local boards who are reviewing 40B projects, because they can be really overwhelming. It's sort of an exceptional part of land use review. And in the interest of having the best projects get approved and the worst projects made better, they really encourage us to go out and work with you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that process and how that happens. I do want to actually begin by just noting one thing that neither David nor Matt said, which I think it's really important for all the folks at home to recognize, is all of those people doing all that work and processing all of these applications, working on these local boards, they're all volunteers. They're your neighbors. Even when it comes down to things like doing planning work or changing your zoning, that is often largely done by volunteers. There are, you certainly have paid staff, but no community in the Commonwealth can survive just on the paid staff. It's really residents who put in their blood, sweat, and tears and time to really make the community good. So that's really to be appreciated, and there's no way to do it without it. So all that said, I know you've experienced a lot there about how complicated the process is to develop projects under your current zoning. That's true in every community in the Commonwealth. Added to that complexity, there's a whole nother way that housing can get built, and that's Chapter 40B, which I'm sure you've heard about. And I sort of want to just let you know, I know that you can really become an expert in local zoning only to then suddenly discover there's this other process. So we want to have a little time to spend talking about both of them, because they're both ways that housing may get built in Wakefield. So what is Chapter 40B? The most important thing to know is that it is a state law. It's not something specific to Wakefield. It was enacted in 1969 by the General Court, and it applies across the Commonwealth. Just to give you a sense of that, 1969 was the same year that I was enacted. So it's a 52-year-old piece of legislation. It's been around a while now. It's starting to actually, it's funny because I think for a while it was seen as sort of revolutionary new, but now we realize it's really been part of our state law for quite a while. It was majorly revised in 2008 to address what were coming to be understood to be some real shortcomings in the legislation. And it is a pretty controversial law, which I will get into. You've probably heard about the controversy. About 10 years ago, it was challenged through a statewide referendum. That when the General Court passes laws, but there is a process in the Commonwealth where we can repeal a law through a referendum. But it survived that repeal attempt. 58% of the voters, over 1 million voters, showed up and said they wanted to keep it. Close to 1 million said they didn't. So it remains fairly controversial, but it has been on the books for over 50 years, and it has produced more affordable housing than any other housing program in the Commonwealth. Over 60,000 units of affordable housing that produced using Chapter 40B over these 52 years. That's more, it's almost double the number of public housing units we have. A lot of people grew up thinking about the projects as sort of public housing as classic affordable housing in the state. But more than twice as many of the affordable housing units in the state are private affordable housing developed under Chapter 40B. Going back to 1969, if you just get for a moment, think about that period, that gives you a little understanding of what this law is and the kind of spirit it was birthed in. This was right in the heart of the Civil Rights era. It's actually just a year after we passed the Fair Housing Act at the federal level. This is when passed the Voting Rights Act. It's when a number of major reforms were happening to recognize the shortcomings of our that we were not delivering the American dream to everyone equally. And there was a real concern about that. And the way that played out here in Massachusetts was through Chapter 40B, there was an understanding of we're a community, we're a state that has really had a strong tradition of local control over land use, over development. We have 351 cities and towns. We entrust each one of them to decide what kind of town they want to be and to adopt zoning laws that will bring that about. And that's deep in our roots. And the General Court recognized that. But in 1969, there was a concern that some of that power may lead to communities being exclusionary. So at the time, Chapter 40B was known informally as the Anti-Snob Zoning Act. Essentially, the allegation was suburban communities were being snobby and keeping out poor people. They had zoning that would not allow affordable housing to be built, with things like 2-acre zoning, with setback requirements, with parking requirements that might make it unaffordable to build affordable housing. And so therefore they never got it. So Chapter 40B was passed to address that. Can I get the next slide? Who's got the slides? Okay, there we go. So here's how it accomplishes that. What the general court did, Mass legislature said, well, we need to have a number for how much affordable housing would be the right amount for each community to have. And sort of out of the air, they pulled this target of 10%. I'm not sure entirely why it makes sense, but they set a target as a minimum that they wanted each community in the Commonwealth to have at least 10% affordable housing. So they set up a framework that said, basically, if you have 10%, you're kind of in a good shape in terms of 40B. But if you don't, then there's a process by which a developer can come in and request what's called a 40B comprehensive permit and essentially have access to a number of powers that would not normally be available in your town. Just to give you an understanding, this is all driven by the subsidized housing inventory that the state keeps. These are the kinds of capital A affordable units that Christine was talking about. They need to be deed restricted. They need to be publicly subsidized or somehow kept affordable in perpetuity for people earning 80% of the median income or less in general. And they keep a list. They know how many housing units you have as of the last census, and they know how many units have been added to this list. And then it's a pretty easy process to determine your percentage. And Wakefield, I think, is currently at 6.7%, but I'm told there are a number that are going to be added to that list fairly soon. In addition, but if you go look it up today, you'll see 6.7%, which is, for those of you who have trouble with math, that is below 10%. So you are what we would say at risk for 40B. A developer can come in and say, you do not have 10%. I'd like to propose a 40B project. Importantly, you'll see that third point, it's based on the most recent census data, the most recent decennial census. So these numbers are all going to be updated with the 2020 census numbers. It won't change how many affordable units you have, but it will change how many units you have. So if your town has grown, you may see that 6.7% drops a little bit. So that's important because you may at some point get to 10% and then later realize you've lost ground. The way the process works, it allows for what we call comprehensive permits. And if you take away only one thing about Chapter 40B, take away those 3 bullet points. A comprehensive permit is a one-stop shop, it's a flexible permit, and it is an expedited permit. And on the next slide, I'll get to all 3 of those. But just remember, one-stop, flexible, and expedited. In order to apply for this, the developer must meet certain requirements. They have to be either a nonprofit, a public, or a limited income developer. They need to agree to limit the amount of profit they will make. And that was intended so that developers could not use this process to make a windfall profit for themselves. This was supposed to be mission-driven housing. They can be a private developer trying to make income, but the income they can make is capped. They need to have evidence of site control, which is common for any project. You can't go and just imagine doing a 40B project. You have to have control of the property. And you need to get a letter from a subsidizing agency saying this counts as affordable housing. It can be ownership or rental. Either one is allowed. There's actually a sort of a funny trick that if it's rental, the state will count all of the units towards your inventory. If it's ownership, they'll only count the affordable ones. And then the last key piece is at least 25% of the units in the project need to be affordable. Not all, just 25%. And so often what this allows is the developer can come in with a project that is larger than would normally be allowed and essentially use what we call cross-subsidy. By creating more market rate units, they can subsidize the affordable ones. And that's how this can work without a public subsidy. The other approach would be a public subsidy could go into it. There are some alternatives and some what they call safe harbors. These are ways that the town can meet certain requirements and avoid 40B projects, either permanently by meeting 10% or for short term by making some progress. And we'll go over those in a minute. But let's go to the next slide and get into this comprehensive nature. So I said it was one stop, it was flexible, and it was expedited. The one stop is, in their wisdom, the general court decided there should be one board in your town to review all local approvals. A developer shouldn't have to go run to 3 or 5 or 7 different boards to get approvals. They should just go to one stop. And they chose, sorry, David, the zoning board. They just, they looked at the different boards and tried to figure out which one has the most expertise at this kind of stuff. They said the zoning board, we think, can do that. They should be in consultation with all those other boards, but the developer does not need to run around to all the boards. They come in with a single comprehensive permit application to the zoning board and ask for all local approvals or waivers that they need. Note the second point. It does not apply to state or federal requirements. I keep saying all local requirements. So that's your zoning, your planning, your local wetlands law, your steep slopes requirements, your historic preservation districts if you have them. But all those state things such as building code or 21E or the Americans with Disabilities Act, all of those still apply. If a project needs a curb cut permit from Mass Highway, it still needs a curb cut permit from Mass Highway. The state granted comprehensive permits to overrule your local rules, not to overrule their rules, okay? So you will often find a project still needs to comply with, say, the Wetlands Protection Act, which is a state law. So they still may need to go to the Conservation Commission for that, but they won't need to go to them for a local wetlands bylaw requirement. That can often cause a lot of confusion. And then next, it's an expedited process. Under the law, your zoning board has only about 180 days to review this project when it comes in. There's a little time it comes in. They have about a month to then advertise the public hearing. So that gives them 1 more month. But that month's got to be spent racing around getting it to all the local boards and officials. Then they have 180 days to review it. Sometimes you can squeeze another 40 days out after closing the hearing and still, waiting to render your decision. It's not at all uncommon for these to get extensions. If you're making good progress and the developer, sees no reason, doesn't think you're dragging your feet, they're often more than willing to give you more time to work things out. But at the end of the day, if they really want to push it, or if you're not making progress, you have 180 days to either approve it, deny it, or approve it with some conditions. It still provides a thorough review. Everything is still on the table to look at. There's a public hearing process. You could do site visits. You get all the kinds of public testimony and open meetings you'd normally have. You get comments from local boards, from officials. You can hire outside peer review experts at the developer's expense, similar to what you might do in a zoning review. The project still needs to have financing, site control, the lawyers get involved, there can be appeals, there's deed restrictions, all that stuff you would expect to make it equally complicated. They can revise the project, they can modify what they came in with, you can get extensions as I mentioned, and most importantly, you do not need to simply approve it. You can approve it with conditions. And generally what the state says is, if there are concerns, you should try to address them. But you can't simply say, we don't like it, it's too dense, it's too big. That's understood, right? The whole concept here is the size of development that your zoning allows is assumed to not permit affordable housing, right? That's why you haven't gotten to the 10% is the analysis. So because of that, something that is not appropriate is allowed. It's understood that it is not exactly appropriate to your zoning. We trust your zoning. You're smart. You came up with the right zoning. But this is an escape valve. You can still require management plans, performance bonds, all kinds of conditions. If they're building it near a busy street and you want a crosswalk or a traffic light, ask for it. If you think that it can connect to the bike path and that would help reduce traffic, ask for it. All those sort of things that are common in zoning review can be included, up to the point the developer says, no, this is going to prevent me from building affordable housing. And the next slide. Here's the last one. I really want to stress that this is in no way the ideal way to create housing. This is understood. When Chapter 40B was created, nobody thought this was going to be the main way we created affordable housing. It was intended to be an escape valve, not a strategy. And it's sort of a public embarrassment for our entire Commonwealth that we are still needing to use this. I think when they passed it, they really thought that by 2021, everyone would be at 10%. It didn't seem even conceivable that we would, over 50 years later, still be fighting the war on poverty and making such little progress. Remember, this was passed in a very utopian time when we thought maybe we could solve the world's problems. And I think that is the work still to be done. It does result in the loss of a lot of local control. You, under 40B, your town is not really in charge of how affordable housing gets built, where it gets built, what gets built, and when it gets built. If you get out ahead of it and build your affordable housing, you can control all of those things. You might remember back at those numbers that said you had about 700 units. If you have 300 more, you'll be at the 10%. So a sort of proactive way to imagine how you would build 300 units would really allow you to be in the driver's seat there. Also, as I mentioned, 40B is not necessarily 100% affordable. It's usually 25% affordable. So you're building a lot of housing and only a small amount of it is affordable. Whereas when you build it yourself, you could often get 100% affordable. There are more productive approaches, such as the housing production plan model or local initiative projects, where you essentially come in as a 40B yourself. Erin, I think I'm going to turn it over to you at that point to talk about some of the local efforts that are going on, and I'll stick around for questions.
Yeah, so I'll be quick just to be mindful of the Q&A. So thank you, Ezra. That was really great. So I think the one thing that was brought up in the story I read earlier was in 2004, the town being kind of ahead of everyone else doing the 18% inclusionary zoning, which I think is really great. I know Dave touched on that. When we do approve any project, the 18% has to be affordable for the developments, which I think is really amazing. I think in 2015, right?
I think so, yeah.
2015, our previous town planner passed a transit-oriented development overlay district, or mixed-use overlay district, 2,500 square feet from our transit line to do this whole mixed-use district, which goes in front of the ZBA, which is those projects that you're now seeing on Foundry Street. So it's been in the works for some time now, and so now we're starting to see all of it kind of come to fruition. So it's not happening overnight. It's been in writing for a while, and that went to town meeting and was passed, and so we'll keep seeing what else comes through.
Can I just jump in, Erin?
Yeah.
I think it's important to note is that was part of the plan. I mean, we did have a plan to do that, and all those two very important bylaws, zoning bylaws, were vetted through a very strong planning board process, a lot of public hearings, a lot of comment. I know Mr. Lowry spoke about that a little bit before. And then it went to town meeting where zoning changes need a 2/3 vote. Very difficult to get a 2/3 vote at town meeting. So there was lots of discussion on both of those projects. And, you know, like you said, we're both of those bylaw changes. So you're seeing some of the projects as a result of that. And when you throw in the 18% affordability component, which I think we should be very proud of as a community, because some of our neighbors have nowhere near that or have zero affordability component in their projects. So I think that's important to note that these were fully vetted, was part of a plan, was gone through the planning board, went through town meeting. So it wasn't just a few people decided to do it. This was well thought out and voted on by the community.
Yeah. And again, I've heard from other communities that are trying to do kind of similar stuff, even that 18%, and they look at Wakefield and see the work that we're doing, and I think they're jealous. I don't know if that's the right word, but think we're doing good work. Yeah. What?
Go with it.
Yeah.
So the other thing I just wanted to mention real quick, because we're running out of time, is we are in a lot of great planning processes. So we're doing the Vision 2030, which is wrapping up. Vision 2030 was a high-level aspirational community visioning for planning initiative. So we've had a number of meetings, public meetings, that I know, if anyone's listening, I'm sure some of you have been on it, and I thank you all for joining us. It was led by MAPCs to kind of guide us with our vision statement. And for me, when I came into this position, this was already kind of in the works, and it was really exciting. But I said, okay, what's the next step? So from the Vision 2030 statement, 30 statement mission, we're going to start our master plan project in January. And so I know a number of people have applied to be part of our advisory committee, which I know the planning board is going to be discussing on Monday. And so a master plan is a strategic framework that guides the town's future physical and economic development based on the community's vision and goals. So it's just going to build on the vision statement, which is really exciting. I think people have been saying, like, what's our plan? Which Steve just said, we do have plans, but I think this will kind of dive in deeper of what we want our community to be. And I'm really excited about this. And I think even this housing forum is a great start to it as well. So just stay tuned. I hope you can join us at the public hearings, and I appreciate everyone that's listening tonight or listens afterwards as well. So I know we want to go to Q&A next. And Steve, do you have anything to add?
No, I was going to say that there's a number of questions in the Q&A,
Yep.
and I'm going to take them in order that they were submitted. I think that's the fairest way to do it, and they keep coming in, so we'll try to get all of them. Here's question number one, and I think our town moderator will maybe say who should answer these questions.
Yeah.
Question number
I'll direct
one
it.
is, why is section 190-31 of the zoning bylaws being changed? It's building within 50 feet of the embankment of an open stream. Will this add more housing, and where?
I think that's a planning board question. Matt, you available to respond to that?
I think also to note this is a citizen's petition.
Yeah. Just one
so
second.
it's not-
Yeah, they're gonna.
Is Matt still available?
Yeah, control room's working on
Oh,
Matt.
yeah. I
there we
just
go.
wanted to put that out there.
Matt.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Had to hook me back up again, so. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, this is a citizen's petition that is coming before the planning board. We will be hearing it on Tuesday night. Truthfully, we haven't heard anything much from the applicant yet, because we haven't started the process. So I really don't want to even hazard a guess as to the ramifications of it until the applicant presses his case and tells us why he believes it's going to be a good zoning change. So I hope
Right.
that
And I think the
answers
other-
it, sort of.
Yeah. The other point is that this is an article at town meeting, and we'll be waiting for the planning board decision on it if it comes, and then we'll take it from there.
Yep.
Next one.
Is it politically realistic to dream about our town directly subsidizing affordable housing so that we can retain complete control over the design and construction? We could also avoid building needless luxury units that are part of the developer 40B approach.
Why don't you handle this,
Okay.
Mr. Not involved in politics ever?
Okay. This is a tough question. I saw this one come in, so thank you for throwing it back to me.
Yeah.
We have done some of that in the past. We did build some affordable housing, senior housing, years ago at Harts Hill, that the town and the Housing Authority was directly involved in. I think it also speaks about if for us to have complete control, we would have to own the land. So I think that an area that may be interesting would be the Butler Ave property that the town did purchase to get rid of a legal issue. And as we work through some of the environmental issues there, that may be a piece of land that will have to go back to town meeting, and that may be, I think it's a 7-acre parcel that may be used for some of these items. The other part is, can we do our own subsidizing? That is a tough one. I'd have to really look at that one. So I hate to punt on who put that in, but that's a interesting question. But those are a couple of items we can look at, and I would suggest to the person that wrote that in is to stay involved, come to meetings, and is this a potential use of some ARPA funds? I don't know, which is some of the federal money coming in. We'd have to look at that, but that's a great and a tough and exciting question at the same time. Another one. We'll move that on.
Can I
Move
jump
on.
in with that one just for
Sure.
another point?
Sure.
I know that Chapter 40B often gets sort of a bad rap when you feel it's a tool or a club that a developer is using to hit you with, but it's also an incredibly powerful, flexible tool for you to use yourself. that there's a process by which you could use Chapter 40B to develop a project on your own. You're an eligible applicant, and it gives you all kinds of flexibility around your local zoning without having to pass zoning amendments and that sort of stuff. And that way, you can decide what's needless and what's not. But these are called friendly 40Bs, and you can either do them by recruiting a developer or do them yourself. But, it's a nice aspect of the, rather than have to work against your zoning, you can get around it if you need to.
Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Next one.
I'm curious about the potential of lowering parking requirements for centrally located construction to discourage high vehicle use in owners/renters.
Zoning Board of Appeals, what do you think?
I would say so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Dave Hatfield, you're up.
Well, I was going to kick it to Aaron. Can you restate the question, please? I wasn't sure that was coming my way.
Can I answer the question or start to answer it, if that's helpful?
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is a great question, and housing doesn't get built for free, but building parking as part of a housing development is usually one of the most costly aspects of building any housing, affordable or market rate. So it's kind of two birds with one stone. If you are able to lower parking requirements, it makes a housing development more cost effective. And if you could put it close to transit and also add in incentives for people to not use single occupancy vehicles, that's a win-win-win. And so, yes, this is another way that Wakefield can change your own destiny. If you would like to see parking minimum requirements either lowered or eliminated for affordable housing, that's something that anyone can petition to adopt to a town meeting. And it might sound like a crazy idea, but things get done starting with crazy ideas. So yes, this is one way to discourage traffic congestion, as well as lowering the cost of building housing and affordable housing.
Okay, thanks. Next one, Steve.
Next one, let me get back. They're coming in fast and furious here. I'm trying to keep up with them. I'm going to combine a couple of these because they do talk about certain standards that and this probably sounds to me like a zoning board question. So the questions are there objective measures that are used to assess whether a proposed development would alter the character of the neighborhood? If so, what are those measures? If not, are there strategies the ZBA uses to prevent undue influence of bias in the decision process? And there's another question that's added on to this, really talking about maybe some of the larger projects, and how do they pass the ZBA's integrity and character standards, some of the larger projects. So looking at how it affects the character of the neighborhood, I say, would be the question.
Mr. Hatfield.
Okay. So the short answer, I think, to the first part, are there any objective measures? No, I don't think there really are in our bylaw. There aren't things that we could say, well, if it checks these boxes, then it passes the test or it meets certain integrity or character, requirements or properties. No, it's somewhat subjective, right? But as stated already, we live in the town. Some of us also work in the town. We look at the design, the style, the massing of the buildings. We look at the neighboring properties in the neighborhood and the district. We'll get input from abutters and citizens, right? We drive by these neighborhoods. We're familiar with them. And we'll look at the design. We'll make sure that, it fits as best it can into the style of the neighborhood, the architecture, the size, the density. And there's a lot of negotiations that go on with the applicants to do that, right? What initially gets proposed typically gets changed quite a bit by the end. They typically look different. They might have fewer units. It may lay out property differently on the property. So, it is very subjective, I will admit, assessing whether something, affects the character or integrity. But again, with local knowledge and some expertise on the board with people who have been architects and been general contractors and other expertise, and the input we get from others, we think we can make that determination on each and every project.
Thanks. Next one, Steve.
Okay, there's a couple that are talking about zoning strategies. What are successful zoning strategies for communities to encourage housing unit delivery? For example, do affordable dwelling units, density bonuses, etc. work? What are examples of communities who have delivered high numbers of units recently? And kind of a very similar question, are there things that Wakefield can do to increase the amount of deeply affordable housing that is available in town, such as project-based units or public housing?
Ezra, what do you got any? I'm sure you have some thoughts on this. We'll give Dave, who is?
Christine might have.
Oh, okay, Christine, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for those deeply affordable units, there's a number of, state financing programs that, that really will assist those. I think that more often the problem is getting them permitted. Communities will be willing to, that even when you look at those numbers that Christine put out there for 80% median income, those are not, formerly homeless folks. Those are what most people in the world would call rich people. We call them, median income. So 80%, I think you had, Christine, they were maybe 100,000 for a family of four, or maybe it was 90, but it was up there. Going deeper into, the 50%, or even 30 in some places, you can get access to a whole bunch of other funding programs. A number of communities have also adopted. Do you have CPA in Wakefield?
No.
Have you adopted the Community Preservation Act?
No.
That's a no.
That's a no.
That's a no. Okay. So that's a real easy target for adopt the Community Preservation Act. Suddenly have a whole lot more money you can put to local housing needs. Many communities do that. It's a great strategy. You barely notice it on your tax bill because you have something like 10,000 different taxpayers, each contributing a small amount as a surcharge. I think it's 1.5% or something. So, Christine, would you say other
Yeah,
strategies?
Christine, you want to follow up on that?
Sure. I know we have a couple minutes left and several questions that maybe we can follow up later. We'll have a record of all the questions that were posted. So in terms of successful zoning strategies, I get this question a lot. And unfortunately, there's no silver bullet in adopting any local policy or adopting any kind of bylaw that would help you build affordable housing. But you can adopt several tools. One of them is inclusionary zoning, which you already have. And then the other is what Ezra just mentioned, is the Community Preservation Act that helps you earmark some of the funds to build specifically affordable housing. And affordable dwelling units is another one that many communities have started to look into. It's just another way to build what we call this lowercase affordable housing, the naturally occurring affordable housing. It's an apartment building, an apartment on the top floor in the attic or in the basement or in a converted garage. And those don't require subsidies. But in terms of successful zoning strategies, it really takes a combination of different strategies and political will to get more housing production. And so I think there's lots of ways that Wakefield can explore further in how to bring in more housing development. But then again, you have your destiny in your hands. Anyone can propose these ideas and see if there's political will to pass these tools at town meeting.
Okay, next question, Bill.
Yeah.
Have some of the newer housing developers been required by the town and the Board of Appeals to make municipal infrastructure improvements that benefit the area where it is located or the town as a whole at no cost to the town? Perhaps things like new water mains, new sidewalks, new paving, traffic mitigation contributions, or putting electrical utilities underground.
Dave?
Yes, that has happened on several of them. Most notably and most recently, I think, on Foundry, the one that's built next to the Harvard Mills building and the one that will be built next to it. Again, for those familiar with the history of Foundry Street, there's There's certainly some dirty soil. The sites had to be cleaned up. That was at the expense of the developer. They've worked with the town to negotiate upgrading utilities underground and sinking some of the utilities to beautify, make the neighborhood look nicer at the end. So yes, that does happen. And again, and in cases where maybe that can't be planned out right away, they'll make a financial contribution to the town to get it done in due course, coordinating efforts with the DPW and other agencies. So absolutely does happen on several projects.
Great. Yeah, this is another question I have. I am, or a statement and a question. I'm not interested in apartment-style living. I wish there was a drive towards smaller, single-family housing. New construction all seems to be for large houses. I don't know, maybe Erin, I don't know, Erin, Ezra, Christine, maybe. I get it. I understand the question.
Yeah, no, I think, Wakefield's pretty built out at this point. I think we're redeveloping some of the lands we have, and we do have some subdivisions that definitely are larger houses. I don't know. I think it goes back to the accessory dwelling units and how we look at that. But Christine and Ezra, if you want to add anything to that.
Can take a crack at this. So I know I might sound like a broken record, but housing is really expensive to build. It doesn't matter if you're building in Boston or Wakefield or Reading or Linfield, the cost of construction is the same. So these larger single-family homes are typically the most profitable way to build housing that guarantees a high return on investment. That's why you see these larger homes being built where they can be built. Again, and what Erin brought up about accessory dwelling units is really great idea, is to make more efficient use of your land. If there are single-family homes that are existing in Wakefield for households that are, for example, seniors living alone and they can't afford to maintain or keep up with housing costs or maintaining their home, they could perhaps convert an attic or a garage into an apartment to cover their costs in sustaining the home, or even move into the accessory dwelling unit themselves and rent out the bigger home to a younger family who might need it. So there are lots of ways and strategies to consider here, but really the market dynamics is driving what kind of homes being built, and which is why we really needed something like a 40B to intervene so that we make sure affordable housing gets built.
Next one.
Okay, with all the recent projects that are being built, are we at or near the 10% in 2021?
Erin.
I'm up. So yes, we are getting close, I believe, to our 10%. We do have Hardwood Mills that is currently not on the docket yet. We do have the Foundry, which is the number of projects on Salem Street, and then there's some Tarrant Lane that is coming back online. No permits have been pulled yet. So I do think we're getting close to our 10%, but as Ezra alluded to, with the census numbers, things could change. And so it's always a moving target, but we are definitely, if certain projects go through, we'll closely be at that 10%. So I know it's at 6.7 now, but we're getting close to that 10%. So.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note on that is that some of the larger projects, Tarrant Lane, for instance, which is a 40B project, they have not pulled their building permit.
Yeah, that's what, yeah.
So that's going to be something that would jump back on there and help out. So.
And I think people also need to realize, like, even though these projects are permitted and passed, and you feel like automatically they should be on the list, there's a lot of requirements that have to go in until they're officially on that list. So more than happy to answer those questions personally if you want to email me. So.
Here's a question that Christine talked about or alluded to. Am I correct that Wakefield voted, and I'm not sure we voted on inclusionary zoning in 2004 at the 80% AMI limit, although that does not really help some lower income people? And I think we've talked about that, and I'll jump in. That may be something that we want to look at in the future, that we've currently been doing items at 80%. So that is something that I think we're taking out of this forum to look at as a community. So let's see. Let's see what else I got. I know. I'm going.
Not pressuring you. I just want to know what the next question is.
I believe the 175 North Ave has 60 total units with 8 affordable units, or 13%. Why did the project and others like that not meet the 18%? I'll jump in, a little history on this
Yeah, I
one.
know
I'll
that
jump
one,
in on
yeah.
this one.
Yep.
I think 175 North Ave, and maybe Mr. Hatfield, think this might be before your time, maybe, or during your time?
No,
There was
no,
there was a
there.
serious environmental issue there, and there was a waiver on that. But at the time that was built, did not the bylaws say up to 18%? And did we make that change, or did I dream that?
And it says 18%, I think, as of '04.
Okay.
But I think for that project, by and large, I would say that there's more the exception than the rule. The vast majority of these projects have all met that 18% at least of inclusionary zoning, if they're not a 40B project. 175 was an exception. I think there's one or two others. And again, it's based, we've made that determination based on the specific circumstances of that project, and we granted them some relief. And one of the factors I think were involved in this one was the cost of cleaning up the site. They were incurring additional costs and infrastructure changes around the site. And as part of sort of a trade-off, I think we would allow them to waive a couple of units there. But again, it's more the exception than the rule. The vast majority meet that requirement. And we really stick to that whenever possible.
This might be a question for Ezra while we're on this. If there are a bunch of 40B projects, can we put one on hold until the others are evaluated? So I guess that must be.
Sure. When I mentioned that there were a whole bunch of changes to the regulations in 2008, that was actually one of the things that DHCD tried to address. They felt there were some towns that were getting hammered with 40B projects and just no time to review them. And I believe, I would have to look it up, or you should certainly check with town council. I believe what it said is if you have more than 2, you can hold. And then there's also some numerical limits in terms of the size of the project and the size of your community. If it's a really large project, you don't need to entertain too many at once. Is that right, Christine? Did I get that right?
You're our 40B consultant.
Yeah, I mean,
Actually,
usually, when I'm there, they're already entertaining the project. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's right. I think it's more than 2. It doesn't mean you never have to consider it, but I think you can put it on hold. I think that's right.
Is that 2 projects going through?
I'll look it up and I'll put the reference in the chat.
We're going to wrap it up.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're going to wrap that up. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Checking with the control room, as I always
Yeah.
do. Okay, this was fantastic.
So we
I
will
gotta
answer
tell you.
those questions that are in there that we didn't get to, correct?
Yeah, this
Okay.
was really informative, coming from sort of a neutral observer. I want to thank everyone: Christine, Ezra, Dave, Matt, and Aaron here in the studio. I think this was informative, and as you say, Steve, the rest of the questions that are there, they'll be answered. As always, I want to thank the crew down here at WCAT. They do a first-class job. They provide this community with a service unlike other towns, if you ever click around when you're visiting, or. So anyway, I want to thank everyone, and that's good night from here at the Wakefield Community Access Television. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.